So here we go. So for those of you who were not on there for a moment or two beforehand and didn't see the little red notice on there, while I'm doing these introductory comments, do me a favor and have a pen and paper ready. Oh, actually, you know what? Don't worry about that. I've changed the layout slightly. You're not going to need the pen and paper. So this is a little bit about who I am. Broadly speaking, I am in the emotional intelligence business with a particular emphasis on the use of mindfulness and emotional intelligence for helping leaders to become more effective emotional intelligence and mindful leaders. And today, we're going to start this 8-week process. Now, you know, I love this slide because it speaks really to where we are in the era that we live in right now, that we always have too many tabs open. And part of the rationale for this program is the fact that we try to do too much. We try to have too many things going at the same time. And sometimes it can bring us right to the brink. And you'll have seen the statistics on stress in the workplace and the need for resilience and so on. And so you've probably experienced as well that yourself, that tremendous pressure that comes from having too much going on. Let me encourage you to think, why did you decide to come onto this program today? What was it about the program that made you want to give up an hour of your life to come on and follow it? And if it had anything to do with finding a more effective way of being a leader or being a parent or being a lover or just being a person in this world, or if it was anything to do with being a leader, being a lover, being a person, and doing that without stress and without pressure, let me suggest that we start right now as we mean to go on and focus in just on this session right now. Now, the inclination always is, I know because I attend a lot of webinars, to put them up, get them going, watch the first 2 minutes, and then go off and do your email. And I have to tell you, it's really interesting. This platform actually allows me to see when you leave your screen. But don't worry, I'm not going to be monitoring this, not Big Brother. So I could go in and call you out for doing your email when you're doing this. But what I want to encourage you to do is just be here for this program over the next 60 minutes. Make the commitment to yourself that I'm actually going to participate in this program alone. Now, if that's something you're prepared to do, what I suggest you do is put your phone on mute or put it on their line. Close down your email and anything that goes beep or bong or squeak to remind you that it's actually there. And let's just spend the next 60 minutes together and start working through this program, which is after all, you see, about presence and about focus and about being in the moment. So let me suggest, close down any tabs that you've got going on your machine, close down your machine itself, and let's just spend the 60 minutes together. Now, I know that many of you, because of the time, are probably in an office environment because we're starting, say, on the Europe side of things, we're at 8 a.m. BST, and that means it's about 9 a.m. in mainland Europe and 10 a.m. in Central Europe and so on. So many of you are probably sitting in offices, and it might be a little bit challenging to work with some of the exercises. But what I want to do is first is encourage us just to come into this session, because you and I and everybody else on this session came in to this session from doing something else. And so your mind, with the best will in the world, is still spinning on whatever that something else was. If it's first thing in the morning, you're thinking about the rest of your day. If it's last thing at night, you may be thinking about what went on the day. What I want to do is encourage you to start a practice that we're going to maintain throughout this session, where when you decide to do something, when you make a commitment to do something in the moment, that you really come into the moment with that. So when I say, where are you now? What I really want to do is a very quick practice to bring you right here into whatever room you're in with me. So let's try and break the disconnection from outside and try and just all come together as a group into this session and as I say, bring our full attention to it. So in the service of that, let me ask you just to seat yourself in a comfortable position, you know, not slouched, but not, you know, military erect either. And as I'm talking, just begin to very slightly deepen your breathing. And as you do so, just count as you're breathing in. So in the in-breath, just counting whatever that count is. So, and then on the out-breath, as it goes out, try and consciously just make that out-breath longer than the in-breath. Ideally twice as long, but just make the out-breath longer than the in-breath. And just do 6 breaths in that way. What we're aiming for is, if, for example, as you breathe in, you're counting 1, 2, and then as you're breathing out, you're counting 1, 2, 3, 4. So just continue with 3 or 4 more breaths like that. And there's no need to get hung up on the counting, but just try consciously to make the out breath a little bit longer than the in breath. I'm just going to go silent for a moment while you do that. Okay, don't worry if you didn't quite get the 6 breaths. Now just let your attention drop to your feet on the floor. Put your feet flat on the floor and just allow your attention to drop down to your feet. And what I mean by allow your attention to drop down to your feet is just become aware of whatever sensations tell you your feet are on the floor. I don't want you to visualize your feet on the floor. I don't want you to imagine your feet on the floor. I want you just to reach out and notice whatever sensations tell you your feet are on the floor. It might be warmth or coolness. It might be tingling. There might be a sense of gravity going on there as well. But just notice your feet on the floor. And as you become aware of the feet on the floor, let's just bring your attention up to where you're sitting on the seat. How do you know you're sitting on the seat? What sensations can you feel that tell you that you're sitting on the seat? Not visualizing, just noticing the sensations of sitting on the chair. You might notice your clothing in contact with your skin, in turn in contact with the chair. You may feel your weight pushing down on the sit bones. But either way, just become aware of what's it like to be sitting here in this chair. Nothing esoteric, just what are the sensations that tell you you're sitting here right now? So just be aware that you're sitting in your chair right now. So what we've just done are 2 really quick exercises that when you refine them are really a great way into the room. You're coming in for a meeting, you're coming in for something new, you're sitting down to do something you've decided to do. Breaking distraction with the outside world is one of the first things you want to do. Now, first thing with the breathing, and I talk about this as being a 6 breaths exercise. With the breathing, what you're doing simply is you're triggering a physical response. You're triggering your parasympathetic nervous system that is designed to calm you down. So essentially your sympathetic nervous system is what powers something called the fight and flight response that keeps you jumpy and keeps you responsive during the day. It's really like the gas or the petrol pedal in a car. the parasympathetic nervous system is like the brake. So just by doing those 6 breaths, you've already started to slow your system down and start to calm a little bit. Now, during the program, as I introduce some of these practices, I'm going to talk about stacks. Stacks it's just a concept that we're going to use for constructing up the practices. As I introduce each of the individual practices, I'll give a kind of a Lego block for each of those practices. And by the end of the 5th or 6th session, I'll be showing you how you can construct together, by putting together these elemental practices, you can construct a practice that's designed specifically to give you what you need at this point in time, whether it's you're trying to deal with stress, or you're trying to be more focused, or you're trying to be more responsive, or you're trying to be more empathetic. I'll help you to build a practice that uses a stack, if you like, of these individual practices. So the first one I've given you are the 6 breaths. I'm not going to walk you through this. I just spoke through it a few moments ago. At the end of the program, the end of today, we'll send you a handout that has this stuff on it, and we're going to be sending you recordings so that you can practice this. But the first stack that we covered was the 6 breaths. As I say, that's simply designed to calm you down. The seat and feet exercise, which was just bringing your attention to your seat and feet, is just a great way of bringing yourself absolutely present, bringing your attention right onto whatever it is that you're dealing with, you want to deal with in the moment. And we'll talk about how important that is as we work through the program. So the second stack, if you like, or the second building block that I'm giving you is this seat and feet practice. And again, we're going to give you a handout at the end, and I'm going to give you some recordings to be able to practice this. But those two are a really wonderful thing. You walk into a meeting, you can be sitting there with your eyes perfectly open and completely looking as if you're absolutely participating in everything that's going on in the room, but you're actually calming yourself. So let me show you really quickly where we're going on this program. We want to look at what it is to be a mindful leader. And that means to improve our performance as a leader and the performance we get from the people we work with, improve our general leadership, but at the same time do that in a way that doesn't hurt us, doesn't cost us in terms of our well-being and our peace of mind. And the program is going to be built on 2 main foundational bricks. We're going to look at mindfulness as a toolkit, the practical toolkit. And because I know there are people online who need to know how this stuff works, we're going to talk about the neuroscience behind that. But what we're really looking to build is a set of emotional intelligence skills. Skills that help us to show up in the world in a way that makes us more effective leaders, more effective parents, more effective lovers, more effective people in the way that we interact with people. Next week, we're going to start looking at how do you show up right now? How do people actually experience you right now? What is your emotional intelligence as other people experience it? And to do that, you're going through an assessment. And that is based on the Genos model. And it's going to help you to figure out how do you become a more inspiring leader? How do you become more self-aware? How do you become more aware of others? How do you become better at managing stress and managing yourself? How do you become better at making good decisions using the emotional dimension? And how do you become more authentic and compassionate? So this is the journey we're going to go on over the next 7 or 8 weeks. We don't need to dive into great detail on this right now. This morning, I want to get you started. I want to get you into some of the material and get you before next week practicing, if you don't already practice, some of the mindfulness techniques. Now, it's the nature of programs like this that we attract a lot of people who already have a practice, who are already working with mindfulness in some way. Maybe you're already delivering it into as programs. You may be a coach, consultant, trainer delivering this material as programs. You may be a leader who's already using it for whatever reasons. What I encourage you to bring to this is a completely open mind. We're going to cover, if you've got already got experience here, we're going to cover some stuff potentially that you know. And as we're covering that, the inclination again may be, hey, look, I know this stuff. let me go off and dive into my email, and I'll come back to this when we get to some stuff I don't know. Let me encourage you to take this beginner's mind approach, to take the attitude that, no matter how many times I hear things, there's probably something new to be learned. Not specifically from me, but from the material and from working through it again. So I encourage you just to bring an open mind to things. So let's start to talk about emotional intelligence. Let's start first off with emotions. And I think there's such a confusion around what emotions actually are. So if we want to talk about emotional intelligence and understanding emotions, we have to first go back to what are they. And I choose to use this definition, which is a formal physiological definition of emotions. So for the purpose of our program here today, we're going to understand an emotion as a complex psychological state that involves three components. So first, a subjective experience. Something happens to you. Somebody says, Derek, I hated your presentation there this morning. That program was useless. Okay. And then secondly, the physiological response, that when somebody says that sense that you get very often in the gut, that sort of gut reaction, that physical sensation. And then the way you react to that, hey, leave me alone, I did my best, perhaps. But what I want you to encourage you to notice as we work through this program is that emotions begin in the body. Frequently, we think of emotions as something that reside in our heads, but in actual fact, they begin with a physical sensation, which is a reaction to some outside stimulus. So somebody frightens you, somebody upsets you, somebody makes you angry. It begins with a physiological response, which you later interpret very frequently by putting a label on it. Hey, I'm angry, or I'm ticked off, or I'm excited, or I'm joyful, or whatever it happens to be. So for us, emotions are going to be really the physiological sensations, and if you like, the behavioral response we have to them, the reaction we have to them. People often get confused with emotions and feelings. What are the difference? And they're very frequently used interchangeably. I would say that the way I like to define it is the emotions are very much the physiological experience, a physiological reaction to an outside stimulus, and they become feelings when you put a label on them. When you say, oh God, that doesn't feel good, I'm angry. Oh, that doesn't feel good, I'm sad. That feels great, I'm joyful. So, but we're going to work a lot with the physiological manifestations of emotions. Emotions, again, being physiological responses to outside stimuli. Here's the reality. Inside our brain, there are a number of structures. One of them, which we're going to focus on an awful lot during this program, is the emotional brain. And we don't have the time to go into exactly where it's located, but if you stuck a pen in through your eye and a pen in through your ear, where those pens cross will be approximately the emotional brain. I don't recommend you try that at home, by the way. And so close to where most of the stimuli come from the outside world, to your ears and your eyes, is the emotional brain. And the emotional brain's job is simply to keep you alive, to help you thrive, to help you survive, to help you respond to threatening circumstances in a way that keeps you alive. Here's the critical thing you need to know. Every single experience, every single stimulus that you have passes through the emotional brain before it gets to where you live as Homo sapiens, before it gets to the thinking brain. So every single experience you have is examined first by the emotional brain before it's passed on to the thinking brain. And it's passed on with a judgment as to whether that stimulus or that experience is a positive thing, a reward, or a negative thing, a threat. And by the time something that happens to us, a stimulus, gets to the thinking brain, we are already biased. Our decisions and the behaviors we display are already affected by that. So first, most important thing in understanding this stuff is that every experience we have, hey, Derek, that's a dreadful program, didn't really enjoy it, is parsed through the emotional brain that says, is this a reward or is this a threat? Is this a positive or is this negative? Can I eat this or will this eat me? And that label of reward or threat, good or bad, is passed on to the thinking brain. So by the time the thinking brain catches up microns of a second later, it's already biased by the emotional response long before it gets to the thinking brain. So your decisions or your behavior are very much affected by your emotions. You can be triggered by outside stimulus into a reward state. Where you're triggered into a reward state where you feel, hey, this is great, I really like this. The impact on you is to make you more open, more engaged, more positive, more inclined to want more of whatever is going on. And so as you can see in the right-hand box there, let me just get my pointer here. As you can see in this box here, there we go. Your experience then is of satisfaction, a sense of meaningfulness and engagement, that the world is full of opportunity. If, however, somebody triggers you into a threat mode, something that some stimulus feels negative, feels like you don't want to have it, well, then the impact on you is to make you disengage, essentially run away inside your mind, gives you a sense of dissatisfaction, narrows your perception. And your ultimate experience of that situation is one of concern, worry, frustration, or stress. And here's the critical thing. If all of our decisions are impacted by our emotional state, we as leaders have to be aware that all of the decisions of the people that work with us, all of the decisions of the people that we interact with are affected by their emotional state. So we want all the time to be managing the environment so that they are triggered more into a reward state where they experience satisfaction, a sense of meaningfulness, feeling of being valued, and so on and so forth, rather than into a sense of concern, worry, frustration, and stress. So we're going to look at how do we manage other people by first looking at how do we manage ourselves. Here's a definition from the founder of Genos, Ben Palmer. And he talks about emotional intelligence being essentially managing negative emotions, making intelligent responses to negative emotions to generate positive emotions in self and others. And that's what this entire program is about. It's about helping you through being present, empathetic, genuine, resilient, and empowering to turn negative situations into as positive a situation as they can be. So we're going to look at how do you manage your own personal emotional and climate so that you're more in that reward state over time, and how do you manage the climate of the people around you, whether they're your loved ones or the people that work for you, so that they experience more of that reward state. So how do you develop emotional intelligence? Emotional intelligence starts with you and I. The first thing we have to do if we're going to manage our emotions is become aware of them. And we're going to spend a lot of time on this program becoming aware of our emotions as they arise in us as physiological sensations, as they affect our thinking and our behavior and decisions we make. Because when we become aware of the emotions, then we've more possibilities, more opportunities to manage them. But more importantly, if we can become aware of our own emotions, well, then we open up ourselves, and this is something you'll see in one of the future sessions. We actually develop a part of the brain that makes us capable of being more empathetic or more aware of other people's emotions. But where it starts is with oneself. We have to start with self-awareness. And mindfulness, I'm going to show you, is just simply a set of tools for helping you to develop self-awareness. Now, mindfulness goes a lot deeper as a set of tools. There are a lot of other benefits associated with it, you know, like well-being, resilience, and management of worry, and so on. But for now, we're just going to talk about it as a toolkit for developing self-awareness. So self-awareness is the gateway to emotional intelligence, and mindfulness is the gateway to self-awareness. There are so many definitions out there of what mindfulness is. Okay? I'm going to share with you, first off, the classic definition. And the classic definition comes from a man called John Kabat-Zinn, who's a pioneer in bringing this material into our West worlds and embedding it into something called mindfulness-based stress reduction program that really started the revolution that has brought mindfulness to where it is today. And he essentially defined mindfulness simply as a being, nothing more than a cultivation of awareness, and we're interested in self-awareness that is intentional. In other words, we decide, hey, I want to be more aware of what's going on with me. Non-judgmental, as in not based upon our habitual reactions to things, but rather just being open and aware of what's going on and not necessarily making judgments, something we'll dive into later on, and in the present moment. So it's really important because emotions come and go depending on what research you look at. We have between 15,000 and 65,000 different thoughts a day, and every one of those thoughts creates an emotional response, a physical response in the body. So the only way you can really be aware of your emotions is if you are absolutely in the present moment. But you know, for practical purposes, I prefer this definition by Andy Puddicombe. And he says it's being in the here and now, being present, being aware of what's going on, and not being lost in thought or distracted or overwhelmed by difficult emotions. And that is the reality of the world we live in. We spend a lot of time, I'll show you statistics in a moment, lost in thought, distracted by what's coming down the track in the future, what's already gone down the track in the past, or overwhelmed by difficult emotions. And for the first time over the last couple of years, in nearly every Western culture at least, this has shown itself in the workplace, where most countries are reporting that in recent times, employees are claiming more for mental injuries on the job, where they're becoming overwhelmed and stressed, than they are for physical injuries on the job. So finding some way of not being lost in thought or overwhelmed by difficult emotions is critical. And this is the definition I like for mindfulness. Why is it important? Well, let me share a couple of things with you that I think is really critical. If we say that mindfulness is about attention or self-awareness, being in the present moment, okay, well then in the busy environment that you and I live in, the reality is it's about being able to be aware of what's going on around us and being able to choose our distractions, because we're not going to make the distractions of our modern world go away. And if anything, over the next few years, we're going to have more distractions in the form of more technology, more messages coming at us, more communication, more demands upon us. Being mindful, being able to be in the present and choose what we focus upon is becoming a differentiating skill set. Here are some stats that came from the Harvard Business Review. This is you, this is me, this is everybody. One major project, a research project that has covered tens of thousands of people and continues to run right now worldwide, showed that most of us spend 47% of our time mind wandering. Mind wandering doesn't mean lying on a bench thinking about all the good things in life. Most of us, the statistics say, spend their time either preoccupied with the past or the future and doing what we as humans do so well, worrying or being concerned, as opposed to being in the moment. So we spend a lot of time concerned about what's going to happen in the future, a lot of time worrying about what happened in the past. And in doing that, we miss what's going on right now. And that has an extraordinary impact upon our effectiveness. 70% of leaders have reported that they're regularly unable to pay attention in meetings. That's you, that's me, it's everybody in the world. Our attention span is getting eroded by Facebook, by email, by all of the distractions we have around us. The ability to be able to bring our attention into a room, to be able to focus on what's going on in the moment has become really, really endangered, really, really eroded. To the extent that Accenture, in a recent book, said that the single most important differentiating factor for you as an individual and for us as organizations that will make the difference between successful and unsuccessful is the ability to manage our attention. The ability to be able to say, I want to focus on this. I want to focus on this session, for example, that Deiric's doing with us this morning. I want to bring myself in there for 60 minutes, pay attention to it for 60 minutes, and actually be able to maintain that attention without being distracted by thoughts, without being distracted by what's going on around us. So attention is important. Everything in our business world is saying that we differentiate ourselves if we can create this ability to be more self-aware, aware of what's going on in our thoughts and our moods, and being able to bring ourselves into the moment. So a lot of this program will talk about self-awareness, about attention, about being in the moment. So how do we develop mindfulness? Well, we develop it really the way we develop any other muscle. If metaphorically I speak about mindfulness as a muscle, attention as a muscle, the ability to be present and pay attention to the present moment as being a facility that can be developed the way a muscle can, well, then we can extend that analogy out and say, if you wanted to develop your biceps, if you wanted to become a stronger, more effective maybe lifting large weights, maybe lifting cases, whatever it happens to be. But if you want to develop your biceps and make them stronger, you'd go to the gym and you'd get one of those sadists that they call personal trainers. And you would, and they would tell you, hey, pick up these 2 weights. And they give you 2 weights for your biceps, and they'd be a little bit heavier than you're comfortable with, but not so heavy that you can't actually do a curl. And they'd say, hey, do some of these curls and just keep going until you can go no further. And the first 1 or 2, you'd say, hey, no problem, I can do this all day long. And after 3 or 4, if they've judged the weight right, you start to shake a little bit, and it starts to become difficult. And that's when your trainer says, just keep going. Just keep pushing, just push it until the point where you can do no more, and you go, darn, leave me alone. That's it, I can do no more. And what your trainer tells you is that in the moment that you fail, in the moment that you cannot do anymore, that you've actually broken down the muscle somewhat, and that next time that you come back to it, the muscle will have rebuilt itself to be stronger. So you go back in 3-4 weeks' time, and the weights that you were doing on day 1 that were difficult are suddenly easy because the muscle has built capacity, has built power, has built strength. Well, we can develop that part of our brains that is responsible for focus and attention and self-awareness simply by exercising it in, if you like, the gym of the mind. So instead of lifting weights like this to develop the faculty of being able to lift weights, with brain training, with mindfulness, we're exercising that process of paying attention. And to do that, we use mindfulness meditation. Many people on this call are very familiar with the idea of meditation. For some others, when I say that, the M word may, just slightly freak you. I want you to be really, really aware that this meditation is just simply a set of exercises, utterly secular, that are designed simply to allow you to exercise that part of your brain that is responsible for self-awareness, that is responsible for the ability to pay attention. And we're going to learn how to do that in a couple of moments. We're going to go through the first process. Now, if you think of attention and mindfulness, we're going to talk a lot over this program about becoming aware of oneself, that is, being aware of the emotions as they rise in you, how they're affecting your behaviors and your decisions. So, as I say, if somebody says, hey, Deiric, I really hated that program this morning, noticing that in that moment there's a physiological reaction, you probably feel it in your gut, a tightness in your gut or a drop in your gut. And then being aware that, oh, this is affecting the way I'm thinking. This is maybe making me feel a little bit more down or a little bit more panicked or whatever. So as we develop, we'll develop that self-awareness, but we're also going to develop, as part of this, that ability, as I say, to pay attention. And we're going to look at 3 basic ways of getting there. The first one is through exercising the mind. We're going to look at practices. Now, I say practices very intentionally because they need to be practiced. This stuff works, and the science shows it works really well, and over the next few weeks I'll show you more of the science, and it shows that you can develop that faculty of attention. You can develop that self-awareness. You can actually grow the part of your brain that's responsible for self-awareness and attention by doing these exercises. But it takes practice. And I'm going to encourage you between sessions to develop that practice. And if you don't already have a practice, I'll encourage you at the end of this to start. If you do, I'm going to encourage you either to continue or to make it a more consistent practice, but that's later. So there are a couple of ways of getting to mindfulness, to that attention. One is simply through the mind, and we're going to do an exercise on that in a moment. And then we look at, we can bring ourselves into the moment and make ourselves more mindful by working on some practices with the body. And then finally, we can do a combination of both. And throughout this program, we're going to develop mindfulness using practices to tune in both to our mental processes and our thoughts and what's going on up there, and to our physical processes, what's going on. We're going to start with the mind. Now, if you read my bio, you'll see that I'm a failed engineer. And that is to say, it took me 5 years to become an electronic engineer, and about 6 months to realize that I'd never be an electronic engineer. It just wasn't me. It just was not for me. But you can take the man out of the engineering job, but you can't take the engineering job out of the man. So I love process diagrams. So before we do this core practice that I want to encourage you to use before next week, I want to show you how it works in a process diagram. So each time when you sit down to do a practice, I'm going to encourage you to do a minute or 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever you can afford on as frequent a basis as possible. You want to sit down with some thoughts of, what do you want to get from this? What is your intention? Why are you doing this? And many people will come to this program for different reasons. You may be thinking, oh, I really like to improve my focus. I find myself very distractible. I want to improve my attention. I'd like to be able to place my attention like a laser beam onto a spot and just leave it there and be able to focus on anything. Or I want to reduce stress and reduce the worry, that the anxiety maybe that's crippling me. Whatever it happens to be, as you sit down to a practice, I'm going to encourage you to be intentional about it, to just tell yourself, here's why I'm doing this. So our first practice, you can decide what your intention is for it. It might be just to start increasing your attention. And what I'm going to tell you to do in a few moments is I'll suggest to you that you close your eyes. And by the way, if you're in an office environment that's uncomfortable, you can do this completely eyes open. But if you're a beginner, I think most people find it easier with eyes closed. And all I'm going to do is say to you, follow your breath. By follow your breath, I mean just notice your breath going into the body and back out of the body. So just following its passage in, its passage out. And I'm going to tell you that you can follow it either by noticing your abdomen going up and down, just paying attention to that all the way on the cycle in and all the way on the cycle out. Or by noticing maybe the colder breath going in, around your nostrils. And as you breathe out, the warmer breath coming out. But either way, following the breath in and following the breath out. And I'm just going to tell you just to keep doing that. And for those of you who haven't done this before, you'll think, yeah, that's easy. I could do that all day long. So you'll be quite focused, you'll be quite open, quite calm. Let me tell you what to expect. You're going to be distracted. Whether it's after 1 breath or 2 breaths or 10 breaths, doesn't really matter. Something's going to happen. You're going to find, oh, I'm no longer focused on my breath. What the hell's going on there? And it might be that a noise happened in the background, you got distracted, now you're thinking about that noise over there. Or a thought came into your mind, or you're worrying about something, you're fantasizing about something, whatever it happens to be. At some point you notice, I am no longer watching the breath. And that's what I was trying to do. I'm no longer paying attention. And at that point, I'll say to you, that's okay. Just bring the attention back to the breath and carry on. This is not a competition. I'm saying to you, don't be self-critical. It's not, I'm darn. Can't even focus on my breath for 2 minutes. It's more, oh, notice that. I've lost attention. And it's really, you might say to yourself, distracted, and just carry on watching the breath. And that's going to happen. We're going to do that over a few minutes. And you're going to follow the breath. You're going to become distracted, likely as not. And then you're going to bring the attention back. And what's going to happen over time as you do that, as you cycle through this, it's really like repetitions of a muscle. You're actually exercising several parts of the brain, but one of them is called the insula, a part of the brain that is responsible for your ability to pay attention. And look at the analogy. It actually follows the same sort of process as you're going through as you exercise until the point where the muscle cannot exercise anymore, and then the muscle grows when it fails. This is probably the only thing you'll do in your life where the failure to maintain emphasis or focus upon the breath is actually success. Because over time, as you notice the distraction and you bring the attention back and notice the distraction and bring the attention back, this muscle of attention, this ability to master your attentional focus will improve. So the key thing here is you're not going for perfection. You're not trying to create an environment where, oh, I can follow my breath in and out for the next 4 hours and I never lose attention. The object of this is to notice when you do lose attention. And in the moment when you're breathing, as I talk you through the exercise, and as you're breathing and you lose attention, you notice you're distracted, just go, oh, distracted, return the attention back to the breath, and know in that moment that I just got a little bit better at paying attention, being self-aware. Because in the moment that you notice that you've lost distraction, you just became a tiny bit more self-aware, a tiny bit more attentive. So we're going to do this in practice now. So once again, I'm going to encourage you, oh, I nearly forgot. Let me do this. This is an old engineering trick or a question. Let me ask you, in front of you got two cogs moving around there. Right-hand side is the light blue one. The left-hand side is the gray one. I wanted to ask you, which one of those do you think is moving the other? Do you think the blue one is moving the gray one? Or the gray one is moving the blue one? Or you just don't know? And let me say, if you can put, maybe just put, if you think it's, let's do it this way. If you think that the blue one is moving the gray one, well then put your hand up now. So on your screen, you can put your hand up. Okay, so we're getting some people. Okay, so let me lower all those hands. We're getting a whole bunch of hands. That's super. How many hands have we got? Yeah, we've got a whole bunch of hands up. Okay, if you think it was the other way around, if you think it was the gray one was moving the blue one, put your hand up. Now, if you haven't a blasted clue, I'm going to lower all those hands. Put your hand up now if you really don't know. Okay, so we got a mixture right across those. Here's the reality, folks. You can't actually tell. We don't know which one of these moved first. But what you do know is if the blue one moves, the gray one moves. If the gray one moves, the blue one moves. And it's really important to understand that emotions and sensations are the same. You will never have an emotion. You will never become aware of an emotion where there is not an associated sensation somewhere in the body. And one of the things we're going to develop over the period of this program is the ability to become aware of those physical sensations. So you will never have a situation where bodily sensations appear separate from emotions. So we can find our way into mindfulness, as I said before, either through the body or through the mind. So when I did the sessions with, or the two practices with you at the beginning, and I had you bring yourself present by noticing your seat and feet, what you did was you tuned into what was going on in your body. And in the moment that you noticed what was going on in your seat and your feet, you were present. You were paying attention. So it helped you to tune in. What we're going to do now is we're going to do a practice before we finish up that is going to bring all of that together. Now, I'm only going to do this practice over about 5 or 6 minutes because I want to keep you as close to time as possible. But the recordings we give you afterwards will give you a little bit more time to stretch out into the practice and to get some more time with it. So let me suggest to you that you sit up straight in your chair, put your feet on the floor. I want you to sit in a military fashion. You don't have to sit as if you're paying attention or just standing to attention. But just sit in a way that suggests to your body that you're going to pay attention to what's going on right now. And as you do so, if you choose to do so, you can close your eyes. If you don't, and it's not comfortable for you because you're in an office environment to close your eyes, well then perhaps what you could do is simply divert your eyes down to the ground and maybe 3-4 feet in front of you with a soft focus. So as before, just begin to take some breaths in counting the in-breath, trying to make the out-breath 1.5 or 2 times longer. So just take a few of those breaths right now. In, counting in. If the count in is 2, the count out be 3 or 4. If it's 4 in, let it be 6 or 7 or 8. So just do some of those. And now, obviously, you're going to continue to breathe, but just allow your attention to drop down and just become aware of the sensations in your feet on the floor. Not visualizing your feet, but just noticing that you can sense into the sensations there. And just sit with that for a few seconds. And now just gently moving your attention up to your behind on the chair. Again, nothing fancy. Just notice whatever sensations you feel sitting on the chair. Just become aware of the sensations of sitting on the chair. You may feel the sit bones pressing down into the chair, your clothing against your legs. Just sit with that for a few moments. And sometimes if this is the first time you've done an exercise like this, you can think, I'm not sure exactly what he means, become aware. Don't worry. Just be open to any sensations that are issuing from that you're behind on the chair. As you practice, this will become more natural and more normal. This 6 breaths and seat and feet exercise is really just, as I say, a simple way of transitioning from one task to another, of breaking the thought pattern that was going on previously and bringing yourself into the moment. So now we're going to do a basic mindfulness exercise. We're going to pay attention to our breath, as I said before. Before we do that, I want you just to gently in your mind set an intention for this. What would you like? What is your intention doing this practice? Is it, I'd like to begin reducing stress. I'd like to increase my attention. I'd like to be a better leader. Why are you doing it? I'm not saying set a goal, just be intentional about it. And now, having done that, start to notice your breath going in and out of your body. Following the breath in, on the way in, following the breath out. And you can notice the breath going in and out a couple of ways. One way is just to notice your abdomen and your chest rising as you breathe in. Then falling as you breathe out. So noticing that movement in and out, staying with that over the full cycle of the breath. I follow the breath by noticing the cold breath going in at my nostrils, all the way in, and the almost invisibility of the warm breath as it comes back out past my nostrils. Wherever it's easiest for you to notice the breath passaging in and out, just bring attention to it. And at some stage, you'll notice I'm no longer paying attention to my breath. That's good. You've just become slightly more attentive, slightly more aware, because you notice you're distracted. You might just say, distracted. And then, without berating yourself, without any concern, without any judgment, just go back to watching the breath. And if you lose attention from the breath 1,000 times in a session, that's okay. The exercise is not about having perfect attention to the breath, but noticing when that attention has disappeared. I'm going to go quiet for a moment and just sit with that following of the breath. Notice when you're distracted and returning the attention to the breath. I'll go silent on that for a few moments. You're just following the breath in and out, remembering that when you lose attention, it's okay. Just note, distracted, and carry on. That's the point of the exercise. Simply to notice you're no longer self-aware, and you're no longer paying attention. You may notice thoughts come into your mind. That's okay. Notice them, let them go, and return back to the breath. You may hear noises around you. Again, just notice, distracted, and return back to the breath. And now on the next breath, as you let it out, if your eyes were closed, just open them up gently. You could stretch if you like. If your eyes are open, just bring yourself back to being present for the session. And in a physical or an in-person session, I'd love to spend some time with us exploring, what was that like? But what most people find, and particularly if they've done it for the first time, is that the moment you go quiet like that, you think, I thought this was going to clear my mind. And yet the moment I started this practice, my mind went bananas. It filled with thoughts. The reality is your mind was always going bananas. It was always filled with thoughts. You just may not have been aware of them. You're never going to clear your mind until that last day when you clear it once and for all. But until then, it's never going to be entirely clear. The critical thing is being able to pay attention despite those distractions, and that's what we're developing. Now, what we just covered is something that I call it stack number 3. I'm going to send you a handout for it, and it's following. First off, it introduced a new element, which was just following your breath in and out, noticing when you get distracted, and then returning the attention back to the breath. But then we combine that together with the other elements that we had earlier, and we get, for the first time, a kind of a more complex stack. So this is going to be our core practice. Those of you who already practice, you probably have something that's very similar to this. I just found when we're teaching people who are learning this for the first time, learning these as separate individual practices that are bolted together is useful. So the practice we just went through, which you started with 6 breaths, designed to put the brake on, slow you down a little bit. You brought yourself a little bit physically present. We can only single task, we can't multitask. So when you're paying attention to your breath or your feet, you cannot pay attention to anything else. You're immediately focused, even if it's only for a moment. Then we set an intention. And intention is not a goal. In fact, I love this quotation from Ed Halliwell. He says, there's no required result. We're simply saying, here's where we're going to go. I'm going to practice and see what's happened or what happens. So in setting an intention to reduce stress, expecting the stress to be reduced after a single session, you're just expressing that that's where I want to go ultimately. And intention is something we're going to talk about a lot as we work through the program. And then finally, you did some basic breath practice. I'm going to give you a recording afterwards that will do that over about 12 minutes. You can do it in a short or as long a period as you like. I'll give you recordings that I find are about the optimal length. And I'm going to encourage you before next week, if you don't already have a practice, to begin at least with this basic stack, with this basic practice. And also, as you work through your week, perhaps as you walk in, you sit down in a meeting, you obviously can't close your eyes and start deep breathing. But you can be sitting there, stealth mode, bringing your attention to your seat and your feet without leaving the room, without zoning out on the people who are in there, and become aware of making your breath a little bit deeper, and that starts to bring you a little bit more mindful. We're very close, in fact, because we started a moment or two late. I'm a couple of moments behind our time. Let me tell you where we're going in session 2. Right now, you're going through a report process, and I would encourage all of you to interface with AFA, whom I'm going to bring back on in a moment very, very quickly, to get your report done before next week, because next week we're going to walk you through your personalized report. Now, if your report is not fully finished by next week, please be at the session anyway, because we'll send you a sample report and you can work through that so that when you get your own, you know how to use it. Because what I want you to do is look at how would people experience you right now? How emotionally intelligent do they see you? Because that's what we're measuring. We'll go into that more next week. And then when you look at how they experience you right now, how do you want them to experience you in the future? What's your vision for yourself as a mindful leader? We'll cover another core practice, which I'm going to add on to the, each week we'll add different elements into the stacks. And unfortunately, because we have to cover your report, and I really want to do a good job of it, I have to ask you, please, to allocate 90 minutes. But, you know, normally going through this report, I hate to be vulgar and talk about money, it normally costs a couple of $100 or a couple of €100 or pounds to get this. And I want you to imagine that you've actually paid that, because you really would want to get your return on that investment for it. So next week, we're going to give you the gift of understanding how do other people around you experience it. So let me, meantime, I'm saying, please get your report finished. If you haven't had the invitation, I'll send you out AFA's email address shortly again, but send her an email. If you're having problems with it, send her an email. I'm sorry, AFA, you're going to get a lot of emails. And get that report finished for next week, okay? Now, many of you work in large corporations. And one of the things we've experienced over the last couple of weeks in communicating with you is that because email has become such a minefield, because it's become such a danger to many corporate organizations, the rules for getting emails to you have become really, really challenging. And so many of you have been interacting with AFA, with questions or with emails that didn't quite make it or got trapped by the filters and so on and so forth. So the way we're going to communicate with you moving forward is in this new group we've set up on LinkedIn. So if you're not a member of LinkedIn, I strongly suggest you become one and join the Mindfulness and Emotional Intelligence group. You'll see it there. And that's where we're going to communicate with you. We're going to send you links to all of the materials that you cover on the program. So I'll show you what those are now in a moment. But let me bring Aoife on just really quickly just to tell you how this is going to work. Aoife, do you want to unmute yourself? And
Hello there. Yes, indeed. So we will be sending you out a link directly to this group shortly after the session. You can search in LinkedIn if you like. As Deiric said, the title there is Mindfulness and Emotional Intelligence Group. But this is really going to be, a lot of organizations have really strict rules around accepting different emails and firewalls. So this is really your best place to get all the updates, all the good content, links to the recordings, links to the handouts. And what was really clear to us is that this was a journey that a lot of people felt was important for them to embark on. And so we've decided to also use this as a space for us to collaborate. A lot of people have decided to learn more about mindfulness for different reasons in their life. So we're going to use this as a way that we can learn from each other, share successes and share struggles as well as we go through the program. Also, if you're active on Twitter or Facebook, you can feel free to tweet out or share that you're going through this Mindful Leader program, and you can use hashtag Mindful Leader Program as well. And we'll make sure that you can stay connected with us in all those ways.
Great, thank you, Aoife. So here's what we're sending you by way of follow-up to this week. We're going to send you a handout that has the first 3 practices on it. Yeah, that's probably bigger than I was going to hold it up. It has details of the first 3 practices. So you'll download that. And each week we're going to add some more pages into that and expand that handout so you have something to take away at the end of the program. But I'm also going to send you links via the group to 3 recorded practices: the seat and feet, the 6 breaths, and the basic attention practice. And 2 types of recordings. One is video, which you'll be able to play on your machine and use it to guide you through those practices. But also for those of you who want to use them on the run, there will be an ability to download an MP3 version to your player, to your personal player, so that you can use them away from your PC. Each week, we're going to give you recordings of all these. We're going to give you backup, etc. So it's really, it's critical that you get in and join that group. When you join it first, AFA has to give you the benediction and approve you on that, but that'll be very, very quickly. So please, if you want to stay up in touch with us and stay on top of this stuff, please get those materials. So at this point, we're kind of at the end of the formal session, and with apologies, we started about 9-10 minutes late, and we're finishing about 9-10 minutes late. I'm going to start into the Q&A. We're recording this. So if you're under pressure time-wise, by all means, drop off and you can catch it in the recording. But again, very frequently the questions are best dealt with in the moment. So if you do have 3, 4, 5 more minutes to hang around, let's go into those now. So Aoife, do you want to give me the first couple of questions?
Perfect. I see requests already coming into the LinkedIn group. That's good enthusiasm, guys. I like it. Okay. So questions. Okay, so first of all, Deiric, someone asked if no seating's available, would you recommend doing these exercises while standing?
Oh yeah, and thank you, whoever asked that question. Thank you very, very much, because in trying to squeeze, we do this as a live program, and you have 2 days to get this in, and so you can really breathe into it and stretch into it and spend more time with it. This seat and feet, I use that before I do a presentation. So if I'm standing and somebody's just about to introduce me to a presentation, I do my 6 breaths, I bring my attention to my feet, if I'm standing. And I can even start to pay attention to my breath, completely eyes open, and that starts to settle me down. Most of these practices you will be able to do completely eyes open as you move through the world. Some of them you kind of need to be sitting down in a quiet room, but most of them you'll be able to do that way. So I encourage you, as you go back into your day today, or you go into your day tomorrow, to start using them, because they are called practices for a reason. And use them when you're standing in a queue. Use them when you're in the bank waiting to be served. Use them, anytime. Bringing your attention to your seat or your feet. You may be watching the TV, your head starts running on what just happened at work. Bring your attention to your seat and your feet. Slow your breathing down a little bit, and it'll help to just break that distraction a bit. But yes, we'll develop that over time. You can do those practices in pretty much any environment.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so Thomas asks, how do our definitions of EQ and emotions differ from other EQ authors such as Daniel Goleman? We get this question a good bit.
Yeah, we're going to look at, Goleman is the big daddy of emotional intelligence. And when he wrote his book in 98, he basically ate the lunch of two other guys called Salovey and Mayer, who had postulated that there was something else out there that was affecting the results people got. And they said that managing emotions was probably it. Now, Daniel Goleman developed a model which, started the world talking about emotional intelligence. Our particular model follows very closely in that we look at emotional self-awareness, we look at awareness of others, we look at what motivates us and motivates others, but our model has been designed very specifically to be used in a commercial environment where the demands on people are slightly different. So we talk about self-awareness, awareness of others, authenticity, or showing up in a way that people actually believe you. Emotional reasoning, the ability to make decisions that take account of emotional factors. Self-management, which is the ability to manage stress and resilience. And then inspiring performance, the ability to manage emotions in others so that they are inspired to get the results that we need them to get. So our model follows very much the same road. It's a more modern model than Goleman's, but the research is built very much on top of all of the research on EI that shows that the way you show up, the behaviors that you demonstrate are very much responsible for the results you get. We always say that how you show up, how people experience you behave, determines how they feel. How they feel determines whether or the extent to which they engage, and the extent to which they engage determines the results you get, whether they're your children, your wife, your husband, or the people that work for you. Thanks for that, Ava.
Perfect. Crystal shared that 10 minutes felt like forever. She's feeling recharged and calm, so thank you very much.
Thanks, Crystal.
Let's see. Okay, a few more questions here, and thanks, folks. We still have a lot of you hanging on, so we'll hope to get to all of these. So, Deiric, we've been asked, can you please re-explain the difference between emotion and feeling?
Okay. You know what? This is a real challenge at times, because depending on the dictionary you go to, there are different definitions. But let me give you the way we deal with it in the context of this program. In the context of this program, we're going to talk about emotions as being something that begin as physical sensations in your body. And next week, we do a practice that tunes you into experiencing those sensations much more and becoming more aware of them. So when a stimulus happens, when something happens to you, somebody says something to you, you have a thought, something happens to you, the first thing that happens, whether you're aware of it or not, is you have an immediate, if you want to call it, gut reaction. So that's what I'm going to refer to as the emotions, that gut reaction. And then whatever is the reaction we have to that reaction. So the way we react to that is emotions. Now, the way I define feelings is, feelings are when you put a label on that. So somebody says to me, Deiric, I hate you. And I get this, sinking feeling in my gut, and it makes me feel sad. In the moment that I say, I feel sad, I feel depressed, I feel angry, it becomes a feeling. I've just put a label on it. So that's the way I define it for the purpose of this program. Thanks for that question.
Perfect, thanks. I hope I'm describing this correctly, Deiric. Lawrence is asking, he's saying he's delighted to participate and practice, is grateful for your teaching. Is it possible to share on group information on a workshop in Paris? Lawrence, I'm not sure if you're asking if you can do this or if Deiric can, but I'll let him speak to that a little bit.
I know Laurence, and I met Laurence on the Search Inside Yourself program in Paris. Laurence, I have no problem whatsoever. I think the best way to do that would be to invite the people on the Paris program to join the group. Okay, and what Aoife will do is when they ask to join the group, she'll suggest to them that they sign up to the program so that they're getting the materials. So that'd be the best thing. So Laurence, absolutely go for it. The people who are on the SIY program and anybody who's on any other program, they're basically fellow travelers are doing exactly the same stuff. So yeah, go for it, Laurence. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Deiric, Amir is asking, isn't mindfulness the same as introspection?
It depends, Amir, how you define introspection, but yes, in the sense that the mindfulness is just paying attention in the present moment to what's going on with you, whether it's the noises around you, the temperature around you, what's going on in your body, the thoughts that are coming into your head, and how all of that is affecting you. Introspection, I think, and this is just me, introspection suggests a little bit more of a cerebral process where you're really thinking through an issue and getting into it in a cognitive sort of way or a mental sort of way. But they're very much, they're in the same area. There's no doubt. It is just having more of an experience of your experience, being present to your experience of the world.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay. And so now we have one around how does our model of physiological first, then feelings, impact in situations of sadness or mental health like depression? I asked this particular individual to clarify as I wasn't 100% on exactly what they were asking. But so, yeah, how does our model of physiological first, then feelings, I guess, impact with situations like mental health problems?
Wow, that's a question that's about that large, and it's like trying to put a liter into a 1 ounce pot, a fluid ounce pot. But let me try and do the short version of it. Mental disturbance, and I am not, by the way, I'm not a mental health expert. I'm not a therapist. I'm talking as a mindful expert, a mindfulness expert. So when we become stressed, when we become overwrought, when things get too much for us, it's very frequently that the emotional weight, if you like, that we're carrying of all of the generally negative things that have happened to us in recent times, it becomes just too much for us to manage. Now, by the time, if you remember that diagram back there where I said that your experiences are filtered first through the emotional brain, and then they get a label to say whether it's a reward or a threat or a positive or negative, and it's passed forward to the thinking brain. By the time you become aware that I'm feeling sad, oh my God, I'm feeling sad, or oh, I'm feeling stressed, I'm feeling anxious, etc., the stimulus that caused that is long gone. It has disappeared. So what we're going to do as we work through the program is we're going to look at how can we become more aware of these stimuli, these sensations as they arise in our body, so that we tune into them earlier so that they don't become the same issue that they are. So in other words, at the point where somebody says to us, Deiric, I hated your presentation, then we know, oh, I'm feeling this physical sensation. And then we'll have strategies for how you deal with that so that it is more diffused. So I think what we're looking at here, I am not presenting this program as a cure-all for mental health, not at all. There are programs out there, one of them, mindfulness-based stress reduction, another mindfulness-based cognitive behavioral therapy for people who are really, really struggling. But for leaders who are going through the sort of daily struggles that we have, where it is a stressful world and they want to deal with it better, we're going to train you how you can become more aware of emotions much earlier as they arise in your body and manage them more effectively. I hope that so-called short answer gives you some insight into it. But as we work through, you're going to see more and more of this. Thank you.
I think that's great. All right, just one or two small more questions. One of our attendees wanted you to clarify, Deiric, when you were talking about the brain,
Yeah.
you mentioned a part of the brain that helps us focus. Was that the insula?
Yeah, there are several parts involved in paying attention and
Okay.
noticing, but one of them, and I'll deal with it if not next week, the week after, is called the insula, and that's a part of the brain that is responsible for your ability to be able to notice what's going on in your extremities, to be able to, I mean, as we talk, if you choose to drop your attention and say, "Can I feel the sensations in the big toe on my left foot?" If you actually do that while we're talking, you'll notice that you can. In that moment, your insula just lit up. Now, what we know from something called neuroplasticity, which we'll talk about again later in the program, is that the more you exercise the insula, the more effective it becomes of noticing what's going on. So the insula is the seat, first off, of self-awareness, both physical and mental self-awareness, being able to notice what's going on with you physically and mentally and in your thoughts. But interestingly, it's also the core part of the brain when it comes to empathy, noticing what's going on with other people. So as we work through these practices of developing your self-awareness, you're also going to be developing automatically your ability to be more aware of what's going on with other people. But it's the insula, INSULA. And if you go into Google and put something in like, oh, I don't know, the role of the insula in self-awareness, you'll definitely get hundreds, maybe tens of thousands of articles.
Perfect. I'll share something in the LinkedIn group as well. I'll take a look.
Yeah, right.
Great. Okay, and then our last, one or two more there. Vlasios, I believe, hope I didn't butcher your name. He said he or she feels like they followed a yoga session, however, more scientific. Is it the same principles?
Yeah, you know, God, I mean, they come from the same cradle. These techniques are not, they might be relatively new in the West, last 100 years, depending on when you decide that this started being paid attention to in the West, but they come from the East, and some of them are many thousands of years old. And yoga and mindfulness, they all come from the same tradition, widely believed to be sort of northern India. So they are fellow travelers. There's slight differences between the way in which, for example, in yoga you manage your breath and the techniques you use for that, but they come down to pretty much the same thing. They're about establishing an awareness, a mental and physical flexibility, if you like. So those people who do yoga will find this very, very powerful. It's no more scientific than yoga. Yoga has an enormous amount of science underpinning why it's effective. It's just that in this program, because you're leaders and some of you may be cynical about it, I pull more attention, or I draw more attention to the science that has appeared in the last 30 years to show that this stuff works. But there's a great amount of scientific research into yoga and showing why it works as well. So yeah, there's a great deal of crossover. Thanks, Vlasios.
And apparently I pronounced the name correctly.
There you go. Good job.
Thank you. So folks, unless anyone else has some questions, you can feel free to type them into the chat box or the Q&A. Otherwise, we don't have anything left at the moment.
I see one just came up from JC. I was looking for an app with the mindfulness exercise covered linked to leadership. I don't have one of those, JC. I don't have an app for that. There is one app that I suggest it's worth your while picking up, and it was free at one point in time. If it's not free now, it's only a couple of dollars, and I will suggest that you use it. I use it absolutely every day. It's created by an outfit called the Potential Project, and one of the things I like in it is besides some recorded meditations, it has a great timer in there. I'm going to tell you how to use that next week, but it has a great timer. So if you look for Potential Project app on Android or iPhone platforms, you'll find that. One that I do know is free. Mm-hmm. And again, I use it every day. If you look for the Insight Meditation app, it's produced by the Insight Meditation Center in Boston, I think it is. It is completely free. And it has tens of thousands of different practices contributed by teachers worldwide, but it also has a timer in there that we'll talk about as we work through, that allows you to time your session so that you're not continually opening one eye to see where you're at. Linking it specifically to leadership, JC, honestly, I don't know if there are any in there, but let me tell you that we will make the links in the program to leadership. But the practices are not leadership practices, they're mindfulness practices. I'll just contextualize them and tell you how to use them to assist you in the work of a leader. So thank you for the question, JC.
Perfect. Okay, I think that's all the questions we have today. But just to remind everyone, if you haven't completed your either leadership assessment, or if you don't work with direct reports and would like to complete a self-assessment, you can contact me. I've posted my email address there in the chat box, and you can get me on LinkedIn as well. It'll be really helpful for you to have your assessment report, as Deiric said, for the next session. So get in touch with me there, and I'm going to go into LinkedIn right away and accept all of your submissions.
And one final thing, thank you, Simon in New Zealand. He says, thanks a billion. It's getting late here in New Zealand and my kids are giving me more and more opportunities to practice emotional intelligence. Breathe, Simon, breathe. Thank you, folks. Just get the report done for next week. It's going to enrich your experience so much, because after next week, you'll know exactly what is it I want to focus on for the rest of this program. So this can really be a changer. Thank you, Thomas, and thank you, everybody. Have a good week, and we'll be in touch late tonight or tomorrow morning with the follow-up materials. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.